everyone, and welcome to another episode of the In Full Bloom Book Club. Here we utilize the transformative power of storytelling to explore perspectives and to cultivate empathy, compassion, and connection. Our theme this season is collective grief and trauma. Our questions are, how does trauma shape us? What consequences of collective trauma are we facing today? And how can we support one another in navigating collective grief? We are currently reading The Collective by Alison Gaylin. Physical and digital book purchase options are in the description box below. This is part 2 of episode 1, where we're discussing chapters 1 through 7. As I noted last time, there are a lot of spoilers, so go read the chapters and come back to join the discussion. If you enjoy this kind of content and value what we are doing here, you can show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Hello.
So we're picking up where we left off. So we are now on question 4, which is another reflection question. In the social media age, we are constantly exposed to others' trauma and left to digest it. I'd confidently say we've seen an increase in content creators sharing very personal and challenging parts of their story. As players in this digital age, in what way, if any, do you feel affected by what is often regarded by opponents of this practice as trauma dumping? Do you feel that this practice is harmful to any involved party?
I kind of made a list of, I guess, the pros and the cons, right? So in terms of harm, I do think there has been conversations of what constant exposure to trauma can do to our minds, whether it be kind of decreased sensitivity or just like how it affects our mental health. I was watching a content creator, I think it was Angela Braniff. Maybe she had researched or read an article or something about the fact that for most of human history, we existed in small communities. And so we had very limited access to other people. And so our brains are not wired to deal with being able to see what people all across the world are struggling with, you know what I mean? And so I certainly think the fact that this has happened so rapidly for us as a society, meaning like the digital age has like gone from A to where we are now so quickly, I imagine that has affected us. Certainly, I don't know that that's a negative thing, or even if it is a negative thing, I don't know if the risk that we're taking there mentally is worth kind of the access we have to other people, and to maybe even providing solutions for some of the pain and suffering that we see. But I definitely think that's a difficult thing. Also, people who are sharing this information are often going to be provided feedback of some sort, criticisms and things like that. And especially if someone's in a state where they feel like, feel kind of desperate to get that off of their chest, to be unburdened, they may not be considering the repercussions of that. My concern is also for people to be looking for others to validate their experience. And again, if you're not being provided that validation, that could be really, really hurtful. I think on the other end, to be constantly seeking that validation, that can be a problematic pattern. And if your identity, and even for, again, content creators, for their brand to be tied to their trauma, I think can be really detrimental. And I wonder like what toll that'll take on people's mental health.
Yeah, I think whenever I've seen someone sharing something personal that happened to them, I do also feel like maybe they don't have an outlet to someone that's close to them. So it's like, if I kind of like say what happened to me on a bigger platform, someone's bound to hear me. Like, it's just like it's trying to be heard. In terms of how do I feel affected by trauma dumping? I feel more sympathetic than anything. Like, dang, like you don't, not so much to say that they don't have a community. Like, I think that's saying a lot. Like, how do you know they don't have a community? But clearly the community that you are part of, for some reason, it's not enough just to tell the people that you know and that are near and dear. And then, do I feel this practice is harmful to any involved party? just to take a hard stance, I do want to say no. Like, of course, I understand that, like, depending on what you're talking about, someone that could have gone through something similar, they could have been living their life, having a fine day, and then they see this and kind of like makes them spiral, like, oh yeah, I remember this did happen to me. So I think it could be harmful depending on what the subject matter is. But I do get kind of confused, like, where's the line between, like, when do we call it trauma dumping, and then when is it like I'm just sharing my story for the better good? Immediately, I just think about the situation with Emmett Till and Mammy Till saying, "I want them to see what they did to my son." It's like, how silly would that sound to be like, "You're trauma dumping. Why would you tell us this, or why would you show us this?" It's just like, I don't know if I can say that was harmful for her to show that. Sometimes people need to see the things that are happening frequently, and they need to be exposed to it if they've been sheltered from it. But at the same time, I think sometimes certain things can be brought up very nonchalantly, like on platforms like TikTok, where people will be like, oh, put a finger down if so-and-so died and then you were homeless. And then, like, sometimes it can be, they're just making too much light of a situation.
True.
But I don't want to say that it's just flat out harmful and a bad thing.
I think those are really good notes, Elena, in terms of just kind of, again, having people having access to other people's stories. And I think that informs like our truth, our understanding of the world. And I think it's again, when you're talking about just people who may not be aware of kind of these other really difficult ways that people exist, whether it be abuse in the home or whether it be racism or whatever it is, them having exposure to that in a really real and raw way may be necessary. And I can certainly think of other benefits for the individual and for the public, other benefits that can be gained from this kind of practice. All right, so our next question reads, Camille expressed her frustration with sympathetic online observers of the public trial following the alleged murder of her daughter. She claims that she was treated as a part of some public agenda. In current times, as our world becomes all at once larger and smaller through the connecting power of social media, there have been criticisms of what is deemed to be fake outrage. These criticisms claim that the perpetrators of this fake outrage use people's pain as a political tool. Criticizers regard it as insensitive and disingenuous. What are your thoughts about the use of individual trauma to bring attention to a societal issue? Are there or should there be any rules of decorum in that regard?
It immediately makes me think of, like, I feel like online I sometimes see conversations about, like, is empathy enough? Should we solely rely on empathy to kind of move people to vote a certain way, or to kind of change people's mind about something? Like, is that effective? And they kind of compare it with, like, introducing people to theory. Should you be telling people, oh, look at this person, look at Samantha. Don't you have a Samantha in your family that this could be affected by this? Versus reading something out of a book about, well, here's why this is right. And I don't know, in terms of the question, I guess I'm a little bit confused. Is the collective trauma not made up of people's individual traumas? In terms of, like, reaching the broadest audience, it kind of makes me feel like you do have to address people on, like, a personal level and provide examples of, like, this is an issue. Here are the people affected by this problem. I definitely see how it can get exploitative, or like you're kind of like cornering someone into being like a spearhead for some agenda or a platform. There definitely should be rules of decorum. I'm not so certain that I would say that there are.
So it's tricky because there's a point of, like you said, exploitation, and how we can get out of hand in that regard. And that's where we start leaning into this disingenuous. we lean into that, and are we really do we really care about the people that this is affecting right now, or are we just pushing an agenda, you know? Because ultimately, these are real people. These are their real experiences, their real life, and we should respect that. But at the same time, when you see injustice happen, it's a lot of our natural instinct to want to bring light to that and bring awareness to that and make changes. It's just a matter of how do we do that in a respectful manner of those who were directly impacted by that injustice, you know? So I don't see it as a bad thing necessarily when certain things happen and now this big movement comes about from it. I don't think that's a bad thing. I see it as a very positive thing. I just think um, when we start, when it becomes super political, when it starts getting diluted by so many different agendas, that's where I think it just starts taking a turn for the worse. So like to answer that second part, should there be like rules of decorum? Of course there should be. Because ultimately we are forgetting that, again, these are real experiences, real people's pain and their traumas, and we should respect that while also wanting to make it to where these things don't happen as often as they do. So I think we kind of lose sight of what our mission is.
I think people want to feel connected and want to feel useful. When a tragedy happens to one person, it doesn't affect me emotionally in the same way that it would affect them. But I think, again, we're all connected by the human experience. And I'm imagining what it would have felt like if it were me, or, if that tragedy is something that affects a lot of different people. Maybe because of some issue or concern that as a society we haven't addressed, I think that I do feel called to address that. And I think also it gives people agency and a certain sense of peace to know that they're doing something about it. It can come off icky when I see someone when I see someone's tragedy being discussed, on some like politics show or something like that, or, especially when it's done right away, it can just feel like these people are grieving, and again, it can feel disingenuous. But ultimately, as an individual, if I were making a decision about whether to galvanize for change, with using a tragedy as a reference point, I would want to get permission from the party involved. I would want to have an intention check on my part about what is this really about. I would want to just be sensitive to the situation.
In the Kaya chat room, one user proclaims, "There is strength and power in collective rage." This statement brings to mind the ongoing debate surrounding what behaviors are acceptable and not as mechanisms for social change. The action of some impassioned protesters have been regarded as destructive and counterproductive. Let's discuss the above quote and provide our thoughts and reflections of what purpose collective rage serves as a tool for change, if any.
For a little while now, when there's been a lot of protests, specifically in regard to like racial injustice, there's been a lot of conversation about whether it be specific organizations or kind of the followers of those organizations. There's been a lot of conversations about like them damaging property and things like that. And one thing I said as a way of trying to provide perspective and conversation with people, and provide an opportunity for people to empathize with those individuals. I've said that kind of not being enraged by the situation, I think, comes with privilege. It is a privilege to feel disconnected enough where it doesn't feel like a crisis or it doesn't feel like that's necessary. I think when people feel like they're fighting for their life, all bets are kind of off. I think, I don't know if it's, for me personally, I don't know if a question of like the morality of it is as useful as just thinking about, is it actually a tool for social change? Because again, if we're talking about people fighting for their rights, they're going to do what they feel that they need to do. Now we can question whether that's what they need to do, what dictates necessity in that case, and there can be a kind of conversation about that. But if I felt like my life or the life of the people I love depend on me doing a particular action, then or if I, is in such a fight or flight mode that I felt like I need to do that, then the question of whether it's right or wrong, like we just disagree on that, you know what I mean? Or maybe it doesn't even matter. So my question would be, is that actually a helpful tool for social change? And I think, me personally, I would need to do more research on like what tools have been utilized in the past, what's worked, what hasn't.
There's most definitely is strength in power and collective rage. We've seen that play out, especially over the past few years. And regardless of whatever the immediate results of that collective rage is, it is powerful. It is strength. There is a lot of power behind it. It brings attention to certain issues that have been going on in our society. It can, spark movements and help us move forward and put into place a lot of like laws and things that needed to be in place in the begin with.
In terms of the quote, like there is strength and power in collective rage, I definitely think there's some truth to that. Like I'm someone that feels like this status quo definitely relies on people like just carrying on as usual. Like the roads are open, people can get where they need to go. Like it's just seems like historically, if you're just like writing like a passionate email to whoever representative, it seems like it hasn't really not been taken seriously. But it's like, it's not until it's like, oh, like this is a problem for everyone that something really moves. Something's inconveniencing the right people. Like, yes, it seems like stuff does tend to shift. In terms of my thoughts and reflections on the purpose collective rage serves as a tool for change, if any, I don't know why that makes me uncomfortable just to think of like I just immediately think of an angry mob. And I think of some of the recent images of mobs that we've seen. I think it definitely serves a purpose in terms of change. But I don't know, it really just depends on like what the circumstances are, I think.
And again, Elena, I think it is a matter of a difference in opinion over like what calls for those type of actions. I think it's clear to us when we're thinking about countries that are trying to overrun, dictators, oppressive regimes. It feels clear to us that like you have to do, whatever is necessary. But I think when we're talking about American society, where we view ourselves as having this democratic process and as being a society, founded by the people, when, I think when we think about our nation, we think of a nation that is receptive to the needs and to address the concerns of the population. And so I think there's a group of people who feel like in any circumstance, there's going to be a group of people who feel like this is what's necessary. And there's going to be a group of people who say there's other ways to go about it. There are other systems. I think there's ways to empathize on both ends.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and close out this episode. Thank you so much, Tri, for joining us as always. Please go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel to continue to further support our channel. And to make sure that you are notified anytime we do post another video here. So please stick around also for more information about the charities our community are supporting this season. We appreciate you all for being here. Please join us for the next episode. There is always room for you here. Great one. Journey well.
Hey Tribe, before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.